You might also see my name is perfect. Looks like recording's good to go. My name is Andy Gray. You might also see my name is Amanda. Most people call me Andy, but you're welcome to call me either. I'm the director for North American Primate Sanctuary Alliance. I just took on this role a couple of months ago. I'm sure many of you know Erica, who has joined us here today. It's so good to have you. So yeah, it's been such a pleasure to get started in this role and to work with all of the incredible sanctuaries that we have in this country. And you know, the timing of Chimp Crazy is very interesting because we are doing some capacity planning work for our Chimpanzees in Need project. So it's quite timely for this documentary to be released. We are really working as hard as we can to see what we can do to prepare for the remaining chimpanzees who are in bad situations in this country, to get them to sanctuaries. So we are very hopeful that this documentary will raise awareness for the plight of chimpanzees in this country and, you know, how we can help them. There are things that we can do, you know, to support getting these chimps to good sanctuaries. So with that, I will hand it over to Diana.
All right, thank you, Andy. So I am Diana Goodrich. I am one of two co-directors with my husband at Chimpanzee Sanctuary Northwest, and we are located in the central part of Washington State, about an hour and a half from Seattle. And we currently care for 15 chimpanzees and 3 cows. And we have a Zoom account, so that's why I'm doing this. I'm also on the Public Affairs Committee of the North American Primate Sanctuary Alliance. And I said this the last week, but we recently met in LA, and we, like Andy was saying, we were talking about kind of chimp capacity and moving forward advocacy issues, and Chimp Crazy came up a lot. And so as I feel really grateful that we can talk about this as a group, and there's a lot of different organizations involved, and we've been discussing what we can do to get the right message out there after watching the documentary, and hopefully get some laws passed so that some of these things that we witnessed in the documentary won't happen again. So that's it for introduction. So just real quick, the flow of the evening, I'm going to go over some Zoom stuff. We're going to do a little recap of the second episode. I'm going to test out some polls, maybe as a way to get the discussion going. So that might be a little free flowing there. And then we'll discuss things. And with the discussion, I encourage people to get on your cameras so we can see your face if you want to. And just feel free to share. If you'd rather not, that's fine too. You can always use the chat. So this meeting is being recorded. If you want to turn on subtitles, you can click CC in your meeting controls. I do ask that you identify yourself. So you can do that by clicking on participants and meeting controls, locating your name, and then choosing rename. And that is also in those 2 documents. If you're on your phone or if you're on your computer, you can look to see how to do that. And it's nice if you can include your affiliation. If you're here with a particular organization, that will help us out too. It's really helpful if everyone just remains muted unless you're speaking, so we can not have a lot of background noise. And here it says if you want to speak, you can use that raise hand feature or emoji. But like I said, I think this group is pretty well behaved and small enough that we can pretty much unmute and then mute again when you speak. We'll just see how things go. And you're also welcome to use the chat and type questions or answers in there, and I will be monitoring that as best I can. If you're not sure how to change the view of who you're seeing, if you go up to the view in the upper right corner, if you select gallery view, then you can see more than one person. Again, the raise the hand feature is there. And I think I covered all that. So here we go. So Chimp Crazy, I kind of am annoyed that they called it going ape, just because of the connotation of all of that. I did get a chance to listen to the podcast. They have a partner podcast that's the official HBO podcast, and I thought it was really interesting. So I'm going to put that in the chat in a bit, a link to that. It's kind of a behind the scenes, like interviews with the directors. And I don't know, I think it made me feel a little bit better somehow, listening to what they were thinking in making it. And then I'm a little skeptical actually about some of the things that they said in it, so not sure. And I wanted to share this photo because I feel like this is the kind of like chimp image I need after watching that episode. So this is Dora and Lucky, a couple of chimps who came from Wildlife Way Station a few years ago, who live at our sanctuary now. So obviously chimpanzees have a full gamut of emotionality and how they interact with one another. And really, this is how they are most of the time. Certainly they have times when they are aggressive and violent, but just like humans, right? A lot of the time they're just really sweet and affectionate. So I think that I might just stop sharing, and if people want to get on camera, we can kind of start the discussion. I'm gonna start, see if I can do this. First time trying a poll here. I'm just gonna start with a super easy one. So how much of episode 2 did you watch? If you want to fill that out. It looks like most people watched the entire episode, about 89%. So for those who didn't, was there a particular reason? Was there a point where you decided I just can't do this anymore? It's good that most people watched the whole episode, so we don't have to do too big of a recap. But if you want to take that, Andy, you're welcome to, just kind of reminding ourselves of what happened during the episode 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have some notes here, so if I'm looking down, that's why, because I wanted to make sure I kind of captured all of the main points of the episode. So the episode starts out, you see Tanya Haddock's getting lip filler. You kind of notice that her phone is ringing off the hook, but you don't know why. And you know, at the end of that scene, learn that she's getting lots of media requests to find out more about what's going on with this situation. You know, PETA saying that Tonka's not dead. She talks about how ridiculous it is that she would be hiding a chimp, and you know that it's just crazy. And then it transitions to her new home and new petting zoo in the Lake of the Ozarks. You don't see any primates in that scene at the petting zoo, but she does say in that scene that she has a pair of gibbons. So interesting that you don't see them on camera, but she does state that she has them. And then it kind of transitions into her talking about how she brokers these animals as pets. And it's a very disturbing scene. You see a lot of baby monkeys. You know, it's a weird scene, you know, it's kind of like there's kind of like playful music almost, but I think there's also like a little bit of a dark tone to it as well. It feels pretty icky to see all of those animals that she's brokering. She says some things during that scene, like that most of her clients are zoo clients that are selling the babies, which I think it's safe to assume those are roadside zoos and not AZA zoos. Um, and, you know, for me, I found it pretty interesting to see, especially the spider monkeys, because I actually just very recently had a call with the Wildlife Confiscation Network and was told that there are genetic studies that have repeatedly proven that the baby spider monkeys that are being sold in this country as pets are poached. They're coming from wild populations. So I really question where she's getting some of these baby animals, particularly the spider monkeys, because there's really strong evidence that, most of these are being poached. So is she really getting them through a poaching pipeline, is something that really stuck out to me. And the amount of money that she claims that she is making is a big point as well in that scene. Another highlight is, the scene with Alan Cumming. He, is asked if, he's concerned that he'll be seen as a hypocrite, and he has a fantastic answer. It was so good, about how, yeah, it's true. He's like, I was a hypocrite, and, but I've changed and the world has changed. And I understand now, that it wasn't in the animal's interest. So I thought that was a really wonderful answer, and I hope that stuck out to the viewers watching as well. And then it gets to the really, really hard part of this episode, which is all about Travis. Again, I apologize for my allergies. But Travis, you learn he was purchased from Connie Casey from Chimp Party. Of course, very cute as a baby. He kind of became famous in the town in Festus, Missouri. You see, he was used in commercials like for Old Navy and Pepsi. Get a really interesting testimony from the stepdaughter of Sandy Harold. A very, very interesting testimony from her. It was really sad to see his psychological decline, as after the traffic incident where they were warned by the mayor that it couldn't happen again, where he stopped traffic for hours because he leapt out of the SUV. You see, as he's confined indoors, the severe rocking stereotype he has. And then, of course, the day of Travis's death is really heartbreaking. I mean, that 911 call is just one of the worst things I've ever heard. I'm sure a lot of you would agree. Charlotte came over to help her. She was having trouble with Travis that day. She couldn't get him back inside. Charlotte Nash, her friend, came to help get him back inside. And it was just really horrific. She brought him an Elmo doll, thinking, because he liked Elmo dolls, thinking it would calm him down, but it did the opposite. And everything from Charlotte's condition in that scene, to just learning what happened to Travis, so him being stabbed multiple times by Sandy, excuse me, because she was, so panicked. And then, him being shot by the police, and the police officer, sharing his story of that. And then, that he didn't die right away, and just how heartbreaking it is that he returned to his cage, is just really, really hard to watch. And then, we learn a little bit about the Endangered Species Act after that, and about, how this could have happened, um, why there was no law enforcement to prevent something like this. They do talk a little bit about the Travis Amendment in Connecticut, after that traffic incident, but before Charlotte Nash was attacked. But of course, it was kind of pointless. It was just, if you have a primate over 50 pounds, you have to have a permit, which wouldn't have stopped something like this from happening. And they talk about how it wasn't enforced. But long before that, there was the Endangered Species Act in 1973, which stopped wild chimps from coming into the country and allowed breeders like Connie Casey to really flourish. They talk a little bit about split listing, so about how, even though chimps are endangered, they were considered endangered in the wild, threatened in captivity in the US. So it was this loophole where labs, zoos, pet owners, breeders were allowed to use them basically however they wanted, because of the split listing, and how in 2015 that loophole was closed and all chimps became classified as endangered. But there's still issues with enforcement, and that's where advocacy groups like PETA, HSUS, and others can step in to take things to court. And then, and I'll try to get through the rest of this quickly, but you see about the cremation, which was really bizarre, and the expert testimony, which I found really interesting, where they tried to recreate, how basically her story about how Tonka was cremated is just not possible. And then kind of the twist of hearing from the psychic. The psychic reaches out to PETA because Tanya Haddock's friend confided in her psychic about saying she was getting groceries for Tonka and a text. So they were able to get her back into court through that evidence. And then finally, you see this court date via Zoom. So the film crew is there filming Tanya as, they have this court date. You see some funny moments, kind of like with the live mic, the mic not muted, and her saying nasty things under her breath. But for the most part, it's kind of about this emotional, dramatic testimony of her claiming Tonka's dead. She's just overwhelmed. She's sobbing. They have to have a recess. And then, of course, at the end, she calls Connie. She's all excited. They couldn't prove that Tonka was alive. And then you see this surprising footage at the very end, where the film crew goes downstairs with her to her basement and they see Tonka's alive, which I would love to hear other people's thoughts on. I've watched that footage a couple of times now, and to me, it looks like hidden camera footage. Diana said she learned some other things in the podcast as well. So definitely some shady kind of tactics by the filmmakers. It's hard to tell what's really going on sometimes. But that is the episode in a nutshell. Hope that helps jog everyone's memory. I know it was really, really difficult to watch.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I just listened to both episodes of the podcast this afternoon, and the filmmakers claim that they suspected that Tonka was still alive, but didn't know for sure, and did not know where he was while they were filming her in the hearing, and only discovered when she led them downstairs that that's where he was, and that they had been like above him that entire time. That's what they said. um um
But, Diana and I were kind of talking earlier about how it's hard to trust the filmmakers. Obviously, they're being deceptive, and they're pretty open about how they were deceptive after the fact, right? They used a proxy director. They were not transparent about Eric Good, the director of Tiger King, being involved. So it's hard to know what to believe sometimes with them.
yeah, for sure. So I'm gonna run another poll here. I'm just really curious. Um, let's see. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Huh. It says, I wonder if I can only do one per meeting. That'd be annoying.
That would be annoying.
Let me try this. Here we go.
Oh, yeah, it came through for me.
All right. So I'm just really curious at the end of the episode, you've sat through the whole thing, and the part about Travis just seems so long to me and so painful. I think it was hard for people who work with chimps, because we know that they can be that dangerous, and sometimes we've been in situations where they've hurt other chimps, and just her emotion of yeah, just the 911 call was so horrific. So I'm just curious, like at the end of the episode, and then it kind of gets lighthearted almost, and this like dramatic discovery of Tonka being alive. So let me see if I can find these responses here. You can also unmute yourself and just share what you felt about the whole thing. I found myself feeling really angry. I was just so angry at Connie Casey for you know, putting all these chimps out into the world. And well, I feel like the film actually does a decent job of, you sort of do have sympathy for people. You kind of do understand that they care about these chimpanzees. At the same time, like Sandy knew that Travis was getting dangerous, and there were so many points in time when she could have done something differently and kept people safe, and even herself, and not have to have locked him up by himself like that. So I ended up feeling just super angry through the whole thing. And I don't know how to see the answers, so
Go ahead, Erica.
I felt pretty disgusted watching it, and none of the facts of the Travis story or even the Tanya story were a surprise to me, because through working with NAPSA, I had been aware of those stories. But having that inside glimpse into Tanya and how she acts and who she is, and even Connie and how they operate and why, really felt disgusting to me. And it just made me that much, Diana mentioned anger. It really grossed me out to see these people who we've been trying to stop from exploiting animals, but seeing how they do it and getting those details really, really was upsetting. And I'm glad that it's making her look foolish, honestly, because Tanya is very foolish, and it's showing that.
I agree. Go ahead, Kim.
I guess, processing it over the last couple of days, I just really was feeling for Travis, especially like what had he been going through for so long. Like Diana, you showed a picture in the beginning, like this is more like the normal behavior between chimpanzees, like this, they're not always what you hear about in the news. And that's what I think most people who don't know a lot about chimps, they end up hearing what is portrayed out in the media. So, which, things like this can happen, but what I don't think a lot of people understand is what it takes for this animal to get to this point. That it was so extreme and sad for Travis to feel that and make it to that point. That was just kind of, I guess, what sat with me the most.
Yeah, definitely. I can read some other emotions here. So irritated and angry, sad and angry that people are so stupid to think that they should have chimps or monkeys as pets. Yeah, Amy, horrified, just horrified. Manipulated, sad and angry at the sensationalism that the filmmakers, I guess, chose to use. Did you want to talk more about that, Cindy?
Well, yeah, because I remember Travis from when that happened 15 years ago, and it was incredibly upsetting even on the news, and the news didn't go into what we saw on Sunday night. But I felt like all the way through this, there could have been another side, chimps in sanctuaries, chimps living, granted they have to live in captivity, but living decent, healthy lives relating to each other. And that none of that was there. And I felt like you're showing people this, you're getting their blood boiling, you're making them really sad. Maybe you're trying to manipulate them to like these people, and you're not offering any alternatives. And I don't know whether they're going to do that in the next episodes or not. But and the PETA guy, he was doing his best, and I had a lot of feeling for him, but yet I didn't think he was given a reasonable I didn't like the way they necessarily depicted him either.
In what way?
Well, I don't know, maybe that was maybe it was just that I was so disgusted with Tanya and the rest of them that I felt like it was just, they needed so desperately to show chimps happy and well adjusted and not with all of the stereotypic horrible behaviors. And so I just wanted the PETA person to be able to speak up more. But he
Yeah.
was a lawyer. He wasn't, you know,
Right.
he was a hired lawyer, so that's different too.
Yeah.
But I felt very manipulated because I knew the story.
Yeah.
And I felt hard, and it was absolutely horrible to watch. I couldn't sleep Sunday night and stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah,
It was really, I think Aaron said on Facebook that was traumatizing. And I think that's a
yeah,
good word for it.
it was.
So I have this other poll. I don't know if this is the proper way to have worded it, but because you use the word sensationalism, and I feel like there's something more like the manipulation or the sensationalism of it, but I'm curious what people think about that, and if those aspects of the filmmaking kind of overshadow any information that we're learning about the actual individual chimpanzees in the story or primate welfare in general. And I see your comment in the chat, Erica, and it kind of leads to another question I have that we can launch in a minute.
I even noticed a difference in the attendance in this Zoom meeting versus other educational Zooms that NAPSA's had about sanctuaries. Way more people are attending because this is sensationalized and it catches everyone's attention.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that that's necessary. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if we get what we want in the end, and that's more chimps being protected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a hard question.
It feels like playing dirty a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
And I think it also kind of remains to be seen too, right? Like, I think it'll be interesting to see the entire series, you know,
Mm-hmm.
how
Yeah,
it pans out.
absolutely. That's really interesting, Amy. You said you've had neighbors ask you about chimps that have never been interested before. I would assume they know that this is your life's work.
They do, yeah. And first, with some of them, this was the first conversation I've ever had with them about chimpanzees. So to Erica's point, it's given me an opportunity to educate people who I would not have had that opportunity to have those conversations with in the past. So, I mean, you said, Diana, my answer was horrified. I was horrified that Tanya kept him in a basement basically for her own, you know, it's not for the chimp, it's not for the welfare of the chimp, it's for the people. And obviously the situation with Travis was also horrifying. I also didn't sleep well. I know a few people have said that. But I have had more conversations, like I said, with neighbors and even family members who've asked me things that have never given me that opportunity to have those conversations before necessarily.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, I think that's what happens. I think it somewhat happened with Tiger King too. It just brings the issues out to people that had never considered them before. And yeah, I think it opens it up for people to wonder about things in a way that they might not have even been interested in before. It's possible. So I think there's a mix. It looks like a mix of results here. People feel like the sensationalism kind of overshadows the welfare issues that are brought up. It does seem like most people think it does. It is just the second episode, so I do think that the next two will kind of answer that question a little bit more. Sarah, what did you want to say?
Well, this is, I guess, maybe slightly off the subject, but I found it interesting how, I mean, she clearly loves the chimps or uses the word love a lot. And I wonder I just wonder about the education, because I feel like, I know that this kind of thing goes on, but when you see Tiger King, when you see this show, it like reinforces that, oh my gosh, it's still like more awful than I even imagine it is. But yet it's like a lack of education in this person that, so it's a sensationalism, yes, of what she's doing in this show, but then like, I don't know, it's like you want to take her to a sanctuary and show her like, well, this is actual chimp behavior, and this, and obviously like you can't do that with every single person that owns an exotic pet, but I don't know, I feel like there's something about like the love that she keeps saying, like it's not really love, like it's something more about like what she's gaining or something, because if she truly understood what she was doing to the animals, it's not love. So I don't know, I feel like there's some like educational component that is just really, missing, that, and obviously that's not the point of the documentary, so that they didn't include that, but whoever said something about like, showing an actual sanctuary in the film would be just I guess it would be boring compared to like the sensationalism that is happening, maybe, or maybe it wouldn't, like, having seen CSNW when the chimps are fighting, like that's not boring. So I don't know, it was kind of just a lot of weird emotions, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's also interesting to kind of think about it in terms of how they're setting this up too. Like in the first episode, I felt a little concerned in the beginning of the episode because it's like, oh, this woman Tanya, she's so out there, and but look at these cute babies she has, and there was kind of like a playful tone to it, I guess. But then towards the end of the episode, I feel like they did that in a way to kind of set you up to be like, oh, ugh, maybe this isn't so cute. So there seems to be some of that happening even in the second episode as well. It's almost kind of like a slow burn. So I'm hopeful that they're setting things up to show us, what a sanctuary can be and what is good for the animals. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope so too. And I think we have heard from other people that they do think that that's the case. And
Yeah.
I think Debbie commented in the chat, just looking at the reviews, it does seem like people who are reviewing the whole series do get that message, and that's what's taken away in the end is all the kind of right messages. It's just getting there, I guess, is going to be a little bit painful. One thing I was thinking about, I think what Kim touched on was just this view of chimps as being like horribly aggressive and violent. And sometimes when we're at tabling events, people will just come up to our table and say things like, oh, I don't like chimps because they eat your face off. That's like this common refrain now about how chimps are. So one question I wanted to ask people is, I think it's, so in some ways it's important, right? We have to know that these are wild animals and people shouldn't have them in their homes. But what does that do for the overall view of who chimpanzees are as a species and as individuals? And yeah, I'm curious what people think about that.
I don't know about others, but I find this to be a difficult question. This is a good one.
It's a very
Yeah,
hard question.
I have option C. I feel the same about both. Both yes and no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I picked C, because I feel like both are true.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Mhm.
I was thinking about Blackfish, which I haven't seen in a really long time, but I think the message of Blackfish was not as sensationalized. But it did have the same aspects. It was the welfare of the marine mammals, but it was also them harming their trainers and showing that they just did not belong in that situation. So I kind of think, well, maybe that is a really important message. And maybe because I was thinking when I was watching it, like, this is too much. They didn't need to go through the whole 911 call. They didn't need to like show the photos of the scene. But maybe it is helpful to have that detail of, and to just to really have those images in people's heads that this is what's possible and this is clearly why chimpanzees should not be in people's homes. Peter.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a two-edged sword. On the one hand, I think it's important that people understand that the true nature of chimps for all the reasons we're talking about, not being appropriate as pets, etc. But in the setting where I deal with chimps, which is as a zoo docent, one of the things we're trying to do is to create some empathy for these chimps, not only the chimps in captivity, but chimps in the wild, because as Dr. Goodall says, for people to do anything, they have to care. And if you portray the animal as being violent and dangerous 100%, it's difficult to build empathy. Whereas if they can see the peaceful side, the caring side, how they relate to each other, and so on, going back to that picture you showed earlier, it goes a long way towards helping to build empathy. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree, Peter. And I think it's really interesting too, because if you think about animals like tigers or, other predators, carnivores, they have an aggressive and violent side too. But I think there is something about chimps that maybe it's something, the similarity that we see as humans, that plays into that. But it does seem to be almost harder to build that empathy for chimps than it does for other animals that can be violent, at least in my opinion.
I think that's true. I think part of it is because it puts a mirror up to humanity too, because I mean, humans are extremely violent too. And if we see that in our closest living genetic relative, then, it's hard to ignore in ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe just disturbing,
Yeah. Yeah.
unsettling.
All right. I'm always interested, Lily, in kind of people who are not in the primate world full time, like what their take is on it. So that's really interesting that your boyfriend didn't know anything about Travis and thought that story was helpful maybe, but perhaps too much in the show. Yeah.
I was telling Diana earlier, it's different. So it's maybe a kind of a strange comparison, but something about it reminds me of like kind of upsetting footage of other animal situations, like maybe footage from a factory farm or footage of animal abuse. It's different than that, but we're also very disturbed by those kinds of images and footage. And, it is kind of hard to tease out, like, when is it too much and when is it something that people need to bear witness to? So that just was something that I thought about shortly after watching the episode is, we don't want to watch, we don't want to see these things. And especially those of us who are in this field, we know about it. And it's really upsetting, but I wonder, like Diana said, if some people do need to see it.
Yeah.
I think as upsetting as it is, that is what happened. So I don't
Right.
love the idea of sugarcoating it or hiding it or saying it's too much, because that's what happened. And that's what the pet trade does to chimpanzees. And that's what chimpanzees do when they're kept in a basement or riding in trucks or whatever it is. it's awful, and it should be shown as awful as it was, because that happened. And maybe if we show it, things can change so that it won't keep happening.
Yeah, I think, Lori, that's a really good point, which is just what you're saying, Erica, is that the details are important, because it's not all about the violence of the chimp. It's about the humans putting them in that situation. And yeah, I think Andy, you have it exactly right. And the podcast kind of went into this a little bit, is just, they were definitely setting it up. So the beginning, it's like cute babies, and oh, Tanya has this amazing relationship with Tonka. And then they show you this other side and show you just how naive, if I think that's probably not even the right word for it, but hubris is a good word, Lori. Just the hubris of humans to think that we can have these animals in situations like that. So I think,
and you know, the sensational aspect too, I think, in a way, is the truth as well, to an extent. So like, if you think about Tanya Haddix and Joe Exotic, you know, these people, they are sensational people, you know. So but then, you know, you don't want to give them too much of a platform, but there is truth in that too, you know. It is the reality.
Yeah, and it's what gets people to watch it too. I mean, just
Yeah,
interesting people. I'm just gonna launch this last poll that I had. Oh, that's not the one. We don't care about that. Here we go. So this, I also was thinking about Blackfish, and I mean, it's kind of similar to the other question, but I guess, and we've been talking about this, but do you think it's effective? Do you think this was the way to go with this particular documentary to convince people? And partly, is Amanda on this call? I don't think I saw her name come up. I was thinking about this because one of our volunteers here had a conversation with JB about this, and that was kind of her take on it. Is there's a limited number of people who are going to tune into a documentary that's just about the welfare of chimpanzees, and they're probably all on this call here. But there will be quite a few people who will tune into an HBO docuseries that's like exciting, and it's about this strange woman, and you're gonna you don't know what's gonna happen next. And so the documentary is not for us, I think, is one of the messages, and it's able to reach more people, so who might not be influenced by the welfare message, I think.
I agree 100%. I think it worked partly for the Tiger King series. It opened up a lot of people's eyes who never would have cared otherwise about roadside zoos and big cats. And I think it has the potential to do that for chimps with this show.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people feel that, you know, Tiger King helped get the Big Cat Public Safety Act passed, for all its flaws, you know. Yeah. Now we need to get the Captive Primate Safety Act passed.
Yeah.
Kathleen, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to say, I also work with pit bull dogs and have for a very long time. And had it not been for Michael Vick and that enormous drug bust, those dogs would still be villainized. And my organization that I volunteer at, we not only shelter dogs that are labeled as pit bull dogs, but we also reach out across the United States and try to work with municipalities and things to say, like, you have to insure these dogs, you have to do things. And the comment was always, they're violent, they're violent, they're violent, they're like a deadly weapon. Michael Vick's bust was also the same thing. In some ways, it was sensationalized. It was splattered over the media for years, but it was the best thing that ever happened to these dogs. People started seeing them as just dogs, which is all they are, and as individuals. So in some ways, maybe sensationalism does help. I'm not saying it's always the best, but people who weren't aware of problems became aware.
That's a great comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not one that I had thought of. Thank you, Kathleen.
Yeah, me
Um,
neither.
I know there's a question here about the Primate Captive Safety Act. So I'm just going to share my screen again, maybe. Oh, there was also one about the page. So on the HBO page for Chimp Crazy, they just have these two resources and you can click through to them. I am not that familiar with the Rainforest Trust, but they have designed a landing page from this link and has a lot of information about work that they're doing for conservation of wild chimpanzees. And then interestingly, the Save the Chimps link goes right to Tonka's bio on their website. So I know that HBO didn't want any spoilers, but it's out. But I am glad that they included Save the Chimps. And hopefully they'll get a lot of new donors that way and people who kind of understand how Tonka is living now. And the first one here in this, how you can help. Can we convince owners to give up primates? I think it touches on what Sarah was saying about like, let's, can we just take Tanya and show her a sanctuary and, convince people who own chimpanzees that there's another way to do things. And I think that has been true in the past. I think, Patty Reagan, who we had on our last call, has worked with a lot of people who have owned chimps in the past, and some of them are amazing and, just got into it very, very, I'll use the word again, but very naively, and realized that they could not handle the chimps anymore and were looking for good places for them and now still support them while they're living at the Center for Great Apes. I don't think Tanya Haddix is that kind of person. It's remarkable to me listening to her and to some of the other people talk about how intelligent chimps are. Like, they have a lot of the facts correct. Chimps are really intelligent, they're social, they need contact, and yet they don't extrapolate that to what they actually need in their lives to be happy and healthy. So I think Tanya's beyond reach. And I think most of the people who still, all probably of the people who still particularly own chimpanzees, are not going to be convinced otherwise. I think there's a lot of information out there that is readily available that they just don't want to hear. There was something about social media in the chat earlier. It was kind of from Carissa. Yeah, so with social media, the posts that gain so many followers, the pages that have so many followers and get views are inappropriate ones of chimps driving golf carts and swimming with tigers and dressing up. And a lot of this comes from Doc Antle and Myrtle Beach Safari. Yeah, they have millions of fans, and sanctuaries, accredited sanctuaries, have fractions of that amount. So, and it's just really sad that that's the case, and it's hard to counteract that. So I think part of the point was, if this documentary might shed some light on that. Like, it's like, oh wow, that chimp I saw dressed up and taking a shower could also be super dangerous, and why are they keeping them there? And maybe it will open up questions for people, hopefully. Educating people about accredited and true sanctuaries. So we have a resource page on our website, and I know NAPSA does also, about roadside zoos and so kind of the difference between pseudo sanctuaries and true sanctuaries. And so there are the links there, and I can put them in the chat in a little bit. And then as far as legislation goes, I thought Andy could talk a little bit more about the Captive Primate Safety Act.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Diana. Yes, absolutely. So as it says here on the screen, the Captive Primate Safety Act is a federal bill that would amend the Lasiac Amendments of 1981 to prohibit any interstate or foreign commerce involving non-human primates for the exotic pet trade, including sale, transportation, and acquisition. It is narrowly crafted to target the commerce in and private possession of primates, and would not impact zoos and other exhibitors, universities, labs, or sanctuaries. So, the Captive Primate Safety Act has actually been around since 2007. It was reintroduced right after the incident with Travis, actually. And it has been successful multiple times in Congress, but has always died in committee. And so it just can't get through the Senate. So, it's interesting, the situation maybe in like 2007 or 2009, looking at it now, things have changed quite a lot. So there are only a handful of chimps that are still pets, which is great. I mean, there's been a lot of progress with chimps in the pet trade. Unfortunately, that is not the case with other primates. So for other primates, it's exploding, it's rapidly increasing, and we really don't know how many pet primates there are in the United States. Sometimes you might see this number of 15,000 thrown around, but there's really no way to verify that. It's actually likely much higher than that number, but there's just not reliable data that we can rely on to verify that. So the Captive Primate Safety Act would really help all of these species of non-human primates that are really easy for people to get. These days it's a little bit harder for people to get chimps because of the Endangered Species Act, but I'm sorry, the end of split listing in 2015. But like we were talking about earlier, and as you saw in this episode with Tanya Haddix, I mean, spider monkeys, capuchins, marmosets, even macaques, these they're just so easy for people to get. So this bill would be an enormous help for those animals. And there's a link, as you can see on this slide. There are multiple places you can take action. So we've probably seen some action alerts if you follow various sanctuaries or welfare organizations. I know Chimp Haven has a place where you can sign up for alerts. Animal Welfare Institute has done a lot of work on the Captive Primate Safety Act. They have an action that you can take on their website at the link that Diana just put in the chat. To really what they need is co-sponsors for the Captive Primate Act. So it's really important to contact your legislator and make sure they're in support of this act. So that's the biggest need right now.
Yeah, thank you. Kathy, did you want to say something? I can try to, here we go, ask you to unmute.
Perfect. Yes, well, the main thing I wanted to share, and this was way back, but when we were talking about Tanya and Connie, I think it's really important for people to understand we can't change those people's minds. There's pathology there. They have a mental, for better lack of a term, a mental illness. And I realize that there are some people that we've been able to shift over to the right side, but I don't see any hope for these people. What we have to do is shut them down and it sounds like this act could do a lot in terms of making that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we shared something last week that kind of showed the current situation and the laws state by state, and then Andy found this updated one that actually NAPSA, I think Erica put together.
Thank you, Erica.
So this just shows where there are restrictions, where there's a full ban on primates, and then where there's a ban on some species or a permit is required. And it's all state by state right now. So I do agree that there just needs to be a federal legislation on this.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which state you live in, you know, it's all the same issue.
Absolutely. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Hey, Amy Foltz.
So I thought that this post the map. Yeah, Robin, I think I can share the map. I'll try to do that in a minute. So I'm just going to share a few interesting links here. So PETA has a pretty interesting website that is a PDF that shows it's updated fairly. Oh, thanks, Erica. It's updated pretty regularly on incidents of primate injuries. So this is not exclusive to chimpanzees. There's a lot of injuries from monkeys as well. And then Born Free has a database that includes all exotic animals, and you can kind of filter. You can filter by state and filter by species of animal. So I think that kind of information is really helpful when reaching out to legislators too. You could even look up your particular state and see if there's been any incidents. There's the map.
What is the Diana, what is the status for Tonka? Does she still have him?
Yeah, so it's not going to be revealed until the last episode, but
of course,
he's now living at Save the Chimps in a group.
Thank God.
Yeah,
that makes my heart sing.
Yeah, it is a good outcome. And to Andy's point earlier, I think they are just building up to that. So there will be at least some talk of sanctuaries later.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So are there any other... Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I see a really good question from Carissa in the chat. Carissa said, also, how is she still able to even own animals? She lied under oath multiple times and housed Tonka in worse conditions than what was the cause to get them removed in the first place. That is a really good question, Carissa. And, you know, I hope that maybe the series will go into this a little bit. And I feel kind of bad, putting Debbie Metzler on the spot. I don't know, Debbie, if you know any more information on this. You don't have to answer, or if you don't know, that's okay too. But I know PETA you know, has done a lot of work on the case with Tanya Haddock. So that really blows my mind as well. And I know that is something that PETA is also you know, trying to compel you know, to have her USDA license revoked. But
so we have sent a couple of termination requests, and we'll continue to pressure the USDA as the series reveals more of her nefarious activities, and hopefully also. So my understanding is that there was a perjury case ongoing. The courts take a very long time to process these things, but hopefully her direct admissions, you know, in this documentary will push that forward as well. So my dad had the same question. He watched it with me, and he said, he paused it and he said, how is she not in jail right now? I was like, it's a very good question. We all share that. So it's just, this is why sometimes public pressure is needed, because the wheels of justice turn so slowly. So that's why we kind of have to combat it from all angles.
Yeah. And
thank you, Debbie. I knew you would have a good answer.
I do have to go. And I think that if people want to hang out, I might be able to turn it over to somebody else. Let me see if I can do that. Or we could just say goodbye for tonight and meet up again next week.
Well, it's been a great discussion. I'm so glad that so many of you came and that you care and that you're watching and advocating, and yeah, I'm very hopeful that we can make some good changes with this, with the national attention on this. Oh, and I'm the host now. Thank you, Diana.
You're welcome.
Andy. Congrats on your new position, Andy.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. You can keep going.
Were there any other questions? I'm behind on the chat. If there are any other questions, we can keep talking or people can drop. It's all up to what you want to do.
There was someone who asked if the bill passes, what will happen to all of the primates currently in captivity in homes? And maybe you know the answer to this, Marcus, and someone also prompted to circle back to it.
I don't know the answer to that, actually. It's a fantastic question. Do you have more information on that, Debbie?
I assume that they'll be grandfathered in. They just have to get a permit. That's what happened with the Big Cat Public Safety Act. So they had, I think, 150 days after it passed to register with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And I assume that's probably what they will do with primates as well.
Yeah, that was kind of my instinct as well. But I didn't know for sure. So yeah, that's often the case. When laws, even state laws pass, there will be some grandfathering. But hopefully it would at least have some long-term benefits.
And because they would have to be registered, there's a little bit more oversight and regulation. So
yes,
because
absolutely.
right now there's this unknown number of how many primates there even are in human houses. So hopefully there'd be a better grasp on that issue. Unfortunately, people will still not report themselves. So it's still going to be an unknown, but better than
at least we could get somewhat of a better sense of it, because right now it's just really a mystery, a concerning mystery. Are there any other questions in the chat that I may have missed? Okay, I see here there's one from Kathleen. One of the things that bothered me in the series, what can PETA do legally? Why didn't they get the DNA on the fake ashes? Why didn't they insist on searching legally with warrants, her house, her entire property, and so on? I do not know the legal issues. So they did do some of that in the episode. I think that Jared Goodman made a good point when, Tanya Haddock said, "Oh, well, you're welcome to come search my home." They didn't expect her to have him in her home. So, and the expert testimony, I think, was pretty compelling on the issue of the ashes. I don't know if you can get DNA from cremated ashes. I'm not sure if that's possible, but I'm certainly not an expert, so it may be. But yeah, Debbie, you might have.
Well, to answer the question about the continuing the searching, you do have to have cause for a search warrant. And so a court has to grant that warrant. And if it's just kind of we think that he's alive and we think that he's there, that's not enough evidence. So what happened with in that episode where they showed some of her text exchanges that we got a hold of through the psychic and that whole interesting path, that is the kind of evidence that then that could prompt something more like a search warrant. And the episode, it'll play out some more, but you'll see that there's additional evidence that comes up and then the court grants a warrant.
Thanks. I should have known you'd know the answer.
I don't want to spoil too much. It's very
No,
common.
no spoilers.
They really are like, I feel like it's such a slow burn with some of
Yeah.
this stuff. They're really like making us wait. So yeah.
And we know it ends well. So that's, I mean, I think this group probably all knows it ends well. The general audience might not know that part. So it might make it harder to stick with it, but it's worth it in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. I agree. I see a message from Lily that it's incredibly comforting after such a distressing episode, and I agree. It's nice to have community and to have all of you here to talk about it. And Robin, I see your hand up, so you can go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say the one thing that I was just remembering when other people were putting things in chat was her whole very dramatic Academy Award winning melodramatic crying scene on Zoom in court. That was just because, you know, we all know that Tonka is alive and well. And so when she's just talking about this whole death and how devastated she was and just the major crying, but I was very glad to see that the judge pretty much doesn't believe her. I mean, she didn't believe her, but and then when she was still on speakerphone and she was talking about the attorney and how she hates him, and I think she used some cuss word, I can't remember exactly, but I thought that was great because it kind of showed her true colors, you know, right there. But I just couldn't believe just how melodramatic she was with the crying and everything. It was just crazy.
It also kind of goes to show how like frustrating the legal system can be. Of course, it is the way it is for very good reasons. Like the judge obviously could see that there was something going on, but you know, there just wasn't quite that level of proof yet. So it's so frustrating to watch, you know, because you know, or you know, us here know. But yeah, there's just a lot of work that organizations like PETA have to do. So we're very grateful for all of the advocacy organizations that do this kind of work, you know, and really see it through. And thank goodness that that's what happened in this case. So
I'll just add to that there are some, obviously it's a limited series, there's only so much time they have. So there are some gaps that PETA's putting materials out to fill. So after each episode, there'll be like blog posts and things on social media, and you can kind of get more background. Thanks so much for doing this again. It was a very traumatic
yes,
episode.
yeah, it was really, really hard to watch. But I got to see Micah for about 10 seconds. Micah,
funny.
who's on this call.
I watched with my family and none of us noticed that. We'll have to rewatch.
It was a brief moment of Micah taking photos. All right, everyone. Well, thank you again for joining us today, and really looking forward to seeing you after the next episode. So fingers crossed that there will be less upsetting and more happiness in the next episode. Certainly by the last one there will be, but fingers crossed.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.